So, Berto, I watched and you watched a documentary on HBO called The Last Cruise, which is about the Diamond Princess that was stuck at the very beginning of the pandemic with a lot of people on board slowly becoming infected, way before we had lockdown in the United States. And so we watched it. I thought we'd talk about it, but I don't think there's a lot to say about it other than just like, wow. So I thought we'd also answer some patron questions and some other kinds of fun things. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and I'm also a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda and I'm a Keymaster's apprentice.
So the Diamond Prince, so the HBO documentary called The Last Cruise, it's about the Diamond Princess cruise ship stuck in Yokohama because of quarantine, starting in, I think, late January. Way before we had lockdown in the States. Do you remember hearing this in the news?
Oh, yeah.
What do you remember hearing about it?
Well, first of all, I don't know if you remember that I was following a YouTube channel that was talking all about the Wuhan situation, and then they started covering the ship, because what they would talk about all the little reports of like, and this one businessman was in this one business meeting, and then they traveled to this thing, and then they traced it back, and everyone in that meeting might have had, anyways. So I definitely was following it. But it seemed so distant, you know. It was like, it seemed terrifying and yet distant. It's right. It's in Japan.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a cruise ship.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Yeah.
You know, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
But watching this documentary, I found myself obviously relating to everyone on that ship.
Yeah.
And the storyline or the story arc of what happened on that ship was a microcosm for what happened for the rest of the world months later.
Yeah.
The first thing you see, so the documentary, if you haven't, it's pretty short. So I think it's like just a 45-minute documentary.
It's very short, and quite honestly, I was disappointed.
I wish it had more meat on the bone.
There was a different documentary about the same thing that I saw on YouTube that was like an hour and 20 minutes or something, and had way more content.
Yeah.
Because it had context. And maybe I think that they were trying to go no, but this is like if you had been on that ship, sort of.
Yeah, the whole documentary is based on footage from people on the ship recording themselves. Yeah. So at first we see people just having fun. Right. We see some of the people that are working on the cruise line filming themselves, having fun working on a cruise ship. And then we see them getting the first news reports of there's this Wuhan virus, but they're still out at sea and they're still partying and they're still fraternizing with everyone and breathing in each other's faces. And then there's a report that, wait, there's a case.
There was a passenger that had been on the boat.
Right, that had been tested positive for COVID. And they just go right back to partying, and everyone's like, huh, well,
that's weird.
Well, they caught him, so you know, just one person. What are we gonna do?
Yeah.
So at this point in the documentary, you're watching and you're thinking, oh, those idiots, because we know what's gonna happen.
Right.
But that is 2020, of course. And when I look back, so for me, Berto, and you tell me your experience. You and I are both hypochondriacs, like legit. On the spectrum. We're probably not debilitated to the level of a DSM label, but we're definitely on the high end of anxiety about illnesses and anxiety in general. And I have always been, and you have always been, a germaphobe. And like when I'm in public, I will note that if I touch something with my hand, I will note my hand is basically a walking time bomb. Like I don't touch my face. I don't eat with that hand until I can.
Yeah, I remember my dad just made me afraid of the world in that sense.
I don't know where I got it from, because my family certainly was not this way. But so when I heard about the Wuhan virus and I heard about the Diamond Princess stuck in Yokohama, I watched the news and I thought, huh, well, we've heard other things like this before, Ebola. I even had H1N1. I had swine flu.
Did you?
Well, I didn't get tested for it, but
you had all the symptoms.
I had all the symptoms, and I got it right in the middle of everything, and it was awful. I just remember thinking like, yeah, that was a pretty hefty flu, but you know, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm sure the world will figure it out, just like Ebola or with SARS or MERS or mad cow. Or, you know, it's never touched us in terms of our lives, you know.
Yeah.
Everything will be fine. And you start hearing about people dying, and you're thinking, well, you know, people die with the flu as well. You know, what are you going to do? And you hear about these lockdowns in China, and you're thinking, well, it's good. They're taking care of it. And I went, not only was I pretty lackadaisical about the whole thing, but I went on 2 trips just before the lockdown.
Yeah.
While there were cases. So
one of them to New Orleans.
So when was the first, so you would know this, when was the first case in Seattle that was reported?
Well, it was the one up in Snohomish County. It was north.
Yeah.
And it was reported like end of January. Like,
okay, right.
Yeah.
So end of January, we have a case in the Seattle area. And
it's the first one reported in the States.
In the States, right. So the entire country, CNN News is like, near Seattle, like Seattle was considered the hot spot.
Yeah.
And in late February, I go to Mardi Gras, which is, you're pressed up against so many people in that, inside and outside.
Yeah.
Constant crowds. And on the plane, you know, I'm on an airplane. Then after I get back from Mardi Gras, late February, early March, so this is well after we've heard of cases in Seattle, I go to Tahoe, which is also inside a hotel. There are casinos. And so I just want to put that out there because I consider myself extremely science-based, extremely up-to-date on these kinds of things. You know, of the people on the planet, I take these things very seriously. I'm terrified of getting sick. I'm terrified of when I heard about the virus, I remember immediately thinking like, well, you know, that could kill me. And I didn't want that to happen. Yeah. And I still, up until early March, was getting on a plane and going places. Yeah. And the only precaution I was taking was washing my hands a little bit more. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say a little bit more. I was actually washing my hands a lot more, and I was carrying around hand sanitizer all the time. But because when I was watching this documentary, I'm thinking, what are these people doing? But then I think about myself. Yeah. And it's easy now to look back. And I think for at least a long time, hopefully, people will at least through our current lens, look back at that behavior in January and February and March and say, what were you thinking, people? Yeah. Even our governments. Like we can look, because there's a quote from Fauci, whom a lot of us will respect, right? That says, you don't need masks. You don't need to wear face masks. He's like, even though some people have died, Americans don't need to wear face masks. We can look at that and say, well, you're stupid. But that's because we know the science now. We know the deal. Back then, they didn't know it was as transmissible through breathing.
That was ridiculous and irresponsible. But yeah, I mean, they were only doing it because they feared everyone would buy the supply.
Well, and they were concerned. We can't know what's in their head, but I also think that they weren't as knowledgeable about how it's transmissible as they would be a few months later. And then they're like, whoa, because I remember in the beginning, because I listened to the science podcast and they were following it week to week. It's actually led by a physician that really knows what he's doing. And I remember in the beginning, he was talking about how the initial science was that if you wash your hands and you don't, if you wash your hands thoroughly, then you should be able to eliminate the risk by a lot. Later on, and it happens slowly, they're like, actually, washing your hands from touching a doorknob or a package that was delivered to you, and I don't know the science, but so don't quote me on this, is a pretty small risk reduction when you compare it to sitting in a room for 10 minutes with someone who has it.
Yep.
And anyway, my point is that you tell me, Berto, it's February. Yeah. There were already cases. Were you like I was, where you're thinking, well, this could be bad, but I don't know. I have to go to the QFC. I want to buy a thing or two.
I mean, my experience was really unusual, I think, because if you will recall, on January 27th, I got super sick with what ended up being many moons later turned out to be thyroid issues. But at the time, I don't know what got me sick. And it could have, in fact, been that I caught the virus. We'll never know. I was sick for like 10 days. Some of the symptoms match, some don't. Who knows? But I was very sick. So I went to the ER two or three times, twice during that 10-day period. I missed work. So I was at home mostly watching YouTube, sitting on the couch, like freezing and feeling terrible. Okay.
And you're hearing reports of a virus that's coming.
Well, I'm watching specifically 2 YouTube channels about it. And now, one of these YouTube channels happens to be a set of folk that are, I wouldn't watch their YouTube videos normally because they're very, how do I say this? They're very much about world conspiracy stuff about finances. But anyways, point is that they're talking about Wuhan. Then I start watching footage, YouTube videos posted from people from Wuhan. And then I start watching this other channel from an actual doctor talking about it. And this is all I'm doing. This is all I'm consuming.
But are you telling your family and friends not to go to the store? Are you telling them not to go to work?
No, I'm not yet there. And I'm still, well, I wasn't going to work because I was sick, but I did start going to work. And more importantly, on February 14th, I went to Disneyland.
Right. So I'm establishing that you and I, as science-based.
Well, I'm making your point like even worse because not only are we science-based, all these things. I sat there with the screen ready to cancel the tickets.
Yeah.
Because I was like, on the one hand, I have my phone playing a video about how this actually looks really serious, but then I was getting so much societal pressure to shut the fuck up because. Look, at work, I remember we were in a little huddle and one of the senior people there, like very high up, was like, oh, this is, was saying the whole, oh, this is no worse than the flu, blah, 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 blah. And I was sitting there and I didn't want to contradict them in public with the other people there. But I said something very meek, like, well, this one's a little different. And that's all I said. But internally, I'm like, I don't think this is right. Then I post a video on YouTube, on Facebook, in my Kirkland, Be Neighborly Kirkland thing, where people post things. And I got slammed. I posted a video from Wuhan, like with videos of what was happening there. And it was
Fast forward 1 week and people are dying in Kirkland.
Yeah. And then it was like, oh, like you're an alarmist, blah, blah. Okay, all these things. And so I was kind of like shell-shocked a little bit. Plus I was having nonstop debates with one of these idiots on Facebook who went from literally, no kidding, 1 week they're saying this is no worse than the flu. 2 weeks later, they're like, China is hiding the bodies. Like, it's ridiculous. Like the same person. But yet, with all that in my mind, and having just been ridiculously sick, I still went to Disneyland.
Yeah.
So
How did you feel when you were there?
I was okay while I was there.
Yeah.
But it was in the back of my mind.
Right. So me too. When I was in Tahoe, particularly, because by early March, it was definitely like a thing.
Yeah.
But same, I was like, well, but I had this trip planned, and all my friends were going to go, and I don't want to be a bummer.
But then the shit really hit the fan, because when I got back from that trip, that's when the old folks home that's 2.5, 3 blocks away from my place, that's where they started dying.
Right.
And then I was like, oh God, because it wasn't like 1 death, 2 deaths. It's like everyone had it there. And they were dropping. And I was like, oh my God. And then I started realizing the employees there, they go to all the same shops and stores around here, the coffee store, all that same stuff that I've been to all these days. I run past that old folks home almost daily because I go on little runs and stuff. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
And then shortly after, like 1 week later or beginning of March, my job closed down. And
well, do you know the exact date? Because for me,
it was like March 6th, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I have my mentor there is like, he's really good at this stuff. And I was just watching him. And then it's like, I go home that day and I get the email. It's like, we're closing the office.
Yeah, it was good because for me, there was a couple weeks there where when I came back from Tahoe, I don't know what day it would have been. It was probably like, I don't know, March 7th or something. And I remember saying, no, we're done. We're locking down. No one, because this is before lockdown in the United States, before lockdown at my university.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nope, we're not leaving the house.
Yeah.
I don't care if I'm paranoid. I don't, like, we have that luxury. We have that privilege. The only reason why I would not do it right now is because of social pressure. And I'm not going to play that game.
Do you know, I appeared on the local news.
What?
I went to Whole Foods when everyone was stocking up on stuff. I went to Whole Foods like 2 or 3 days right before that because I was like, I think we're going to need some supplies. So I went and I had already ordered a pack of N95 masks like in early February.
Yeah.
And
well, asterisk for me, I ordered them a year ago because of the forest fires.
Oh, okay.
And
that's
so,
smart.
but I couldn't wear them
right.
because they said, if you have them, you're a dirtbag.
You're a dirtbag, right.
Even though I bought them a year
I never
prior.
ended up wearing them either, yeah. So, but I went to Whole Foods like, I don't remember what date it was, but it was right before the rush, you know, right before everyone started stocking on toilet paper and everything. And I was there and there was a news crew outside. So they interviewed me as I was coming out with my groceries. And I was buying like, I wasn't buying tons and tons of toilet paper.
Did they air your clip on the
Yeah,
news?
they did. Yeah, because I got text messages. I saw you on the, like,
what did you say?
My mom's like friends, like one of hers, like, I saw you on the news. They asked me, oh, so what do you think of this whole thing? And without trying to be alarmist, I was like, oh, I think it's quite serious. And, you know, I'm going to do what I can to prepare. And that's what I said. And I said more because I made like a little political statement or something, but they only aired that bit.
Did they put your name in the bottom?
Yeah.
Did they put that little thing over the N?
I didn't see it myself. I saw, I saw a YouTube, or I saw someone sent me a video.
What do they call that little thing over the N?
The
Nieta.
Yeah, I think it can be called a tilde, even though the tilde is also the accent, but it can be called a tilde.
Anyway. Yeah, so I decided to teach over Zoom that week.
Yeah.
Even though none of my colleagues were doing it.
Right.
and half of my students were like, thank you for doing this, because I didn't want to go to the university.
Right.
And the other half of the students were like, eh.
There's so much social pressure for you not to be a weirdo.
Right.
Why are you being a weirdo?
And then the next week, everything shut down. So I was in Tahoe,
Yeah.
I believe the very last weekend that you could ski there.
Yeah.
I think I heard just maybe even a few days later, they shut down Tahoe.
Well, they shut down Disney like maybe 10 days after I was there. Maybe It was only a week.
Yeah. So I want to go on the record so that all of us can not judge those people in early March who were
in January.
Right.
Yeah.
And then watching this documentary, it's easy to laugh.
Right.
How stupid were you? Again, just to reiterate, Berto and I are super science-based. We're up on things and we're paranoid. And we still did not take precautions because we just didn't know.
Yeah.
Are we overreacting? Is it like Ebola where it'll just fizzle out after a huge amount of worry? You know, there's no way that anyone could have predicted what it ended up would have been.
And it's so expensive, both literally and socially, because I was thinking, should I just cancel my trip? Like, think about it. That's an expensive, I'm not going to get my money back on most of the stuff. And I was going with friends, and it's like, what a weirdo. Like, we're not going to Disney because of the flu. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I gave in to, now, I was okay. So was I okay to not cancel? I guess. But it's like you're rolling the dice no matter what.
But you and I could have passed it along without us even knowing it.
Absolutely. And it's Disneyland.
Yeah.
And Mardi Gras.
Yeah. God. So, yeah. The two worst places.
Disneyland.
And then a week later,
oh God,
in New Orleans, people are dropping like flies.
It's crazy.
Like a week later, they're talking about the hospitals are starting to fill up because of Mardi Gras.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, to put a bow on this ridiculousness, on the plane back from Tahoe, I'm crammed up next to a guy who is sniffling and sneezing.
Oh, I think you told me this.
And coughing without any, without doing what, he's coughing like into his hand.
His hands.
He's not washing his hands. He's, he's wheezing. And I'm just like, well, if he has it, I have it.
Oh, man.
And maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Just no way to know. So in the documentary, inequality was depicted how?
Well, I guess there was...
Which is another microcosm for
totally.
the planet.
Well, there was a couple aspects. One of them was that the crew was treated really kind of poorly.
Right, exactly.
They were like, well, you guys have no choice. You got to work. You got to take the risks.
Right.
And they were all concerned. There was that one gal, I think she was Indian, and she actually reached out to her government. Right. It was like, this is not okay. And she felt like a whistleblower. She kind of felt guilty about it.
She said that her employer said she could not do that.
Yeah, right.
And she did it anyway because she was so scared.
Yeah. And I think there was also this aspect of, well, they weren't letting everyone know the same information. Like, eventually they finally started being more open. But at first, they were really keeping information like away. Like they weren't telling people enough information. And there was that one guy that like finds out that his whole his air vent had been covered up, right? Because he opened his door and he's like, what?
Right.
So it's like they weren't giving passengers enough data.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you watch the documentary, you'll see that the people who work on the boat, who are, a far less privileged than the people who are passengers on the boat, are literally in the bowels, not literally, but they're in the
they're
bottom.
working next to each other. They're not taking any, they're not confined to a room because they can't. Right.
They have these tiny little rooms and these tiny little workspaces, and they're below the water line, so they have no windows.
Yeah. And there's no air, no fresh air.
No fresh air. Yeah. And they are quarantined and stuck in these places, and they have to work. And so you see this sharp contrast between the white Americans in the upper decks who have a deck. They're not in a good situation either, but at least they get to step outside and see the sun and look out over the city of Yokohama.
And by the way, how tragic that if the Japanese authorities knew then what we know now about actually open air is really good for stopping this, it would actually made a lot more sense to try to get everyone out of that boat.
Right. Yeah. Put them in a tent.
Yeah.
Put them in tents in the parking lot. Right.
But they were so afraid. And to be fair, the footage coming out of Wuhan was end of the world style footage.
Right. Yeah, you would have had riots in Yokohama if the government allowed these people to get off the boat. Yeah. Because you had the government just like, F no, we're not going to let you. Yeah. Why should we? Yeah. Like, why is it our fault that...
By the way, a small note about the masks, because this really pissed me off. Look, I'm not a medical professional. I know nothing about any of this stuff. So back in February, to me, it was just so obvious. Like, look, in Asia, they constantly wear masks to prevent flus. Okay. So I'm like, well, of course it's like you can transmit it through coughing, of course. The videos I was watching, they were pointing studies that actually showed that even though it didn't seem to be airborne, it was definitely transmissible through particles in the air, like water, like spittle and stuff. So I'm like, who are we kidding?
But context on that point, which I remember following very closely too, the prevailing wisdom, even among medical experts, was it wasn't just breathing in a room with someone, which of course now we know not to be true. It would be coughing. Sure. So if you're in a room with people who don't seem to be coughing or sneezing, then the spittle and the droplets are too few to cause alarm. Now, of course, we know different.
But there has been, since then, there has been folks that came out and admitted that they were scared of which is a fair thing. They were scared of hospitals not having access to masks, which actually did happen.
Yeah.
And so it was a multi-level problem.
Yeah, I think it was
no
both.
one prepared for this.
Right.
No one was prepared. The pandemic team had been disbanded.
Right.
There were no supplies ready to go. And when we found out that there was a problem coming from Wuhan, no one kick-started the thing. So they were legitimately scared that everyone was going to go out and buy out all the toilet paper and the masks. So they purposely suppressed the idea that you needed masks because A, they weren't sure it was airborne in the first place, and B, they were scared of that.
Well, I think it was mainly they weren't aware of the science yet, because if they were, they would have said, don't buy N95, but you can use cloth masks that you can manufacture from at home. They're not as good.
That part's fair, but the reason I'm so skeptical is because at the time there were so many non-governmental professionals not saying their opinion. They were pointing to studies that were showing that a mask would stop N% of blah blah blah, and that what's the coincidence that months later they're finally like, yeah, you guys should all wear a mask. Also, what's the coincidence that all the countries that early on started wearing masks had the lowest levels?
Well, right. Well, we didn't have that data. We did not have
South
it
Korea, Taiwan, I think.
Look, I'm not defending the United States government. I'm saying that for me, and again, this is that 2020 thing, and for the professionals that I was following at the time, the prevailing wisdom was just sitting in a room with someone who is asymptomatic and not, spitting droplets into the air. Your risk is low. That's the prevailing wisdom was washing your hands because...
But that wasn't based on studies. That was basically them just trying to cover their ass. There was no studies that said, well, we did this study where it showed that washing your hands prevented COVID case. That didn't exist.
It's generally a good idea when it comes
masks with flu.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, I'm not defending. I'm just saying that it's attempting. Like you said, what other thing you said? It's coincidence that they eventually figured it out. Well, the reason why they figured it out is because as people started to come down with it, there were more epidemiologists who would look into, okay, who were you in contact with? What was the environment? And they started to triangulate tons and tons of data, anecdotal report, because, it's not, you can't just wave like on Star Trek this thing around and go like, how is it transmitted? You have to like piece it together like a mystery. Yeah. And they got all those reports, and then they started to determine, oh, actually, it seems like asymptomatic people sitting in a room can create enough virus that will infect anyone sitting in that room. We didn't know that in the beginning. And so everyone now wear a mask. It wasn't coincidence that later they just changed.
I know I was totally being sarcastic because the thing is that we can't forget they weren't looking at other countries that were having success. Because if you remember at the time, the official line was, this isn't a problem.
Right.
And that was the official line well into March.
Oh, yeah.
So,
well, the
reason I got so upset
if you follow
about
certain politicians, and their ilk, it was never a problem throughout the entire pandemic.
And I got upset about this because even in March, I was having debates with actual people that are part of the medical community on Facebook who were trying to tell me that actually wearing a mask is probably riskier because you're adjusting your mask and you can pass the virus that way.
Right.
And
which again, given the lack of data in March, I think it was understandable given the lack of data.
But listen, can we all just then fine? Let's just say I got lucky in my intuition. Can we just now say from now on, just to be safe?
Yeah.
Wear a mask.
Oh yeah. yeah. Heck yeah.
Next time something like this, just wear a mask.
Well, for me, when I did get finally vaccinated, I started venturing out into the world, and I was now wearing a mask. I would go places and forget to bring my mask because I never went anywhere.
Right. You were not used to it.
Like, up until more recently, the past couple of weeks, I've been going to a lot more places and, of course, wearing more masks. But there was a good month or two post inoculation for me where I probably prior to me becoming fully inoculated a couple months ago, the whole pandemic, I probably wore a mask 3 or 4 times.
To get the mail.
Because there was one time I had to go inside a bank because I couldn't do it outside the bank, which I found to be extremely irresponsible.
Yeah, right?
How come I can't talk to you on the phone?
Yeah.
Like so I had to go, and it was like a definite, I have to do this now. And it took like 2 hours, and I double masked, and I sat there, and I was so paranoid and stuff. And, but there are only other couple moments where I even ventured out into the world. Anyway, so
for you, it was like system shock.
Yeah. So for me, it was like, I don't know what it's like to wear a mask, and I would forget them anyway. But yeah, my conclusion is, hopefully we've learned. If humans are predictable for the future based on the past, we will not have learned. Because the next time this happens, the same BS is going to happen again.
There was I forget, it was like a 150-page or something SARS report that was published by the team that stopped that epidemic from happening.
Yeah.
With all their recommendations, their findings and stuff. And if you just read through it, you would just smack your head repeatedly.
Yeah.
Because it's like, why wasn't this the playbook?
Right. And to be specific, I'm not even an epidemiologist. I'm not a scientist in this field. But I know the answer to that question, which is obvious, which is you need to invest tax dollars into having an infrastructure that has a fast response and testing.
You need to respect science. You need to respect science.
Yeah. You need to have masks stockpiled and continually, replenished. You need to have lockdowns that happen immediately.
Yeah.
You need to have money available to people that are economically affected by those lockdowns. And and you spend, as a society, as a globe, a month of inconvenience, and the virus will literally disappear.
Can you imagine? I was always so sad about that reality, because I know that, certain people came on TV and said like, oh, it's just a 2-week lie. And I was like, no, of course it's not. Because first of all, you started it too late. Second, people are not going to listen. But if we could be ants for once.
Right.
You just little, what is this, Star Trek?
Or the Borg.
The Borg, just for once. Not have our own individuality. Stay at home for like a month, and here's your check.
2 weeks.
I mean, let's be generous. Let's just call it a month, and here's your check. Here's your paycheck. Mortgage is forgiven. Just that 1 month.
Yeah. Just eat what's in your pantry. There's probably enough, and you probably have enough fat stores you'd survive. You know what I mean? Like,
because that was the thing. The virus doesn't just survive without a host.
Right. It just goes away. In fact, if we all did that for a month, most viruses would disappear.
Yeah. And the variants that ended up happening wouldn't have happened.
Right.
The mutations.
That are still happening still killing. There was a case of a Delta variant case that died recently, and they were vaccinated.
Yeah. This is where we can't just let our guard down now.
Yeah. So and the experts I'm listening to are saying there's a possibility that for the rest of our lives, we will be in a constant vacillation between lockdown and not lockdown, and vaccinations and being, in variants. Like we might, the life we're living right now,
permanent changes.
The life you and I are living right now, Berto, which is like, there are some places we can't go. There are some people we can't come into contact with. There's a Delta variant out there that's ready to kill us.
Yeah.
We're probably going to need a new vaccine soon. It's probably like, this is the new life. This is the new world.
The one thing I was excited about when it first started, when the lockdown started, I was like, I wonder if we're going to make a slight dent in the pollution.
Yeah. Which kind of happened.
It did for a little bit.
It didn't, not a dent, it just slowed. The destruction of the world slowed down a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
When it first happened, Berto, first lockdown, Do you remember how long you thought it would happen? Given your science-based, you're on top of the news.
By that point, I in fact remember saying in a meeting, it wasn't a popular opinion, but I remember saying in a meeting, like, and notice how even my pessimism was still so optimistic. I was like, I think we're going to be here through the summer. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to be there. So we locked down in March. My pessimism was like, I think we'll be here through the summer.
Yeah, me too. Something like that. I think it evolved based on these other experts I was listening to. At the beginning, I was like, well, maybe it'll just be a few weeks.
I definitely didn't think that. I never thought that because
even at the very beginning,
because I knew it was too late by then. Because like when you have people on TV saying this thing is beat, we've got it beat, we're down to a few cases, we'll be done in 2 weeks. I'm like, no, well, we're obviously not. And then when, of course, the 2 weeks come and go and the cases are just going up, it's like, God.
Well, yeah. And the other thing back then was so few people were getting tested.
Yeah.
Because they were telling you to maybe get tested if you have symptoms.
Right. And there weren't tests. There actually weren't tests. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a break, Berto, and reset and answer patron emails. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Hey, deserving listeners, as you all know, I am constantly recommending that people go to therapy. We all need therapy from time to time. Well, one of the options available that is definitely worth checking out is BetterHelp. If you're looking for a therapist, I would give it a try by going to betterhelp.com/Kirk. Make sure you use the promo code Kirk because you get 10% off your first month, and it really helps us out. As you watch these videos, I know many of you have been motivated to find your own therapist, which is great because you deserve it. And I know also that it can be hard to find a good fit, find the right one for you. Well, one of the options available in terms of your shopping is to go to betterhelp.com/Kirk. I've been told you can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. You can message your counselor at any time. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. I've also been told that it's often less expensive than in-person therapy, and you should know that this service is available to clients worldwide. So go to betterhelp.com/Kirk to get 10% off your first month today.
All right, we're back from the break, so I want to do some OPPs.
OPP!
For some old patrons who have been patrons since June of 2017, all the way back.
Oh my gosh.
All the way back then, years before the pandemic.
We were babies.
Before Bill Cosby stories were really.
Oh my gosh.
We have Ardo from Finland. You know, I need to make sure I look at FI country code, FI. Finland, yeah.
There you go.
So we have Ardo from Finland. We have Hillary from Utah. We have Sergey from Virginia. We have Shanti from Australia. We got Christina from I don't know where. We have Elise from Seattle.
Yay!
We have Leia. Good old Leia from Philly.
Alderaan.
We have Brad from Florida. We have Lindsay from Bellevue.
Oh, nice. Representing.
We got Bill from God knows where. We have Teresa from Connecticut. Stephen from New South Wales, Australia. And my sister from Duluth, who was
Your sister became a patron?
She became a patron all the way back in June of 2017. So thank you, Ardo, Hillary, Sergey, Shanti, Christina, Elise, Leia, Brad, Lindsay, Bill, Teresa, Stephen, and my sister Colleen for becoming
incredible
patron all the way back in June of 2017.
Come on, Colleen.
And sticking with us this whole time. I probably told this story before, but you know, the song Call Me by Blondie. Call me.
On the line when you call me.
Call me anytime. My little brother, because it was really...
Colleen.
Thought it was Colleen, yeah. My little brother's like, why? He was probably 3, he was 4. He's like, why is this song about you, Colleen? We're like, huh? He was like, well, they're saying Colleen. We just thought it was the funniest thing. So we did an episode on spending.
Yeah,
you remember talking about, and some people had some questions. We have Allison who says, this is on the Facebook fan page, has anyone else changed their spending habits since COVID started? I'm in Canada, so we've been in lockdown for over a year. I find I've been shopping online and buying fast food a lot more than before. It's gotten so bad I buy myself coffee almost every day, even though I wish I was saving for a trip or something. I feel like I need to buy myself these things to feel a little bit of happiness just to get through the day. I like ordering clothes online because getting packages in the mail is something to look forward to. Maybe it's because I don't see my friends and have social connection I feel in my life. Berto, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. When it first happened, when the lockdown started, I went on a bit of a shopping spree. Now, I've talked before about like spending compulsions. I was being mindful of that, but I was still aware, and it was like...
What'd you buy?
Well, I think I mentioned one of the things I did is I was like, all right, if I'm going to be here, I need a really good setup for podcasting, for making videos, and for work. And so I upgraded my computer.
All right. Yeah, we both
with
did,
you.
yeah.
I bought a camera. I bought lights. I bought a podcasting microphone because I was using my Corby, recording mic, and I was like, I'm not going to use this on a daily basis for hours on end. Like, that's not smart.
Why? Why is it not smart?
Because I'm like that's my special mic. If something happens to it, like that's a lot of money. I'm just going to use it for recording songs. Otherwise, I got to buy a podcasting mic. So I bought one of those Shure podcasting mics.
Well, so it's funny. You bought a crap. For you, it was a way step down to buy the Shure. For me, that Shure is as much as the most expensive mic that I own.
Right. And it's a really great mic.
Yeah.
And I bought that, and my big purchase was my compressor. I was like, I didn't have a compressor. And remember, we talked about this, and you're like...
Oh, I didn't know you bought... I thought that compressor had been around for a long time.
No, my preamp had, but that compressor, the original I bought, I sold it to a person on eBay. And I didn't have it for all these years. And I didn't actually have a compressor. And so when you were like, you need to compress your audio, I'm like, fine, I'm doing it. And I had put the money aside, so I was like, all right,
$5,000.
So I bought my compressor. But so I went on that, and then I also, I remember buying the groceries, of course, but I also treated myself. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to order a little caviar from Whole Foods. So I ordered like a little caviar. And
what about like little things, little shopping sprees? Like,
I bought my comic book. Remember I told you my number one issues? I bought a few of those on eBay.
Yeah, Allison, I can completely relate to you. I totally especially in the beginning of the pandemic, out of boredom, out of just wanting contact with the world. Maybe it was metaphorically bringing the world into my house.
Making Jeff even richer.
Exactly. Yeah, my Amazon purchases and eBay purchases just skyrocketed. There was a time when, no joke, we were getting a package every day.
Yeah, same.
For maybe 9 months. And not only because I was buying all this equipment for my setup as well, my podcasting video setup, but also I was spending so much time in my office that I just wanted it to feel special or like magical in a certain way. So I started buying all of these things from my childhood and things that represented who I am, and buying more Legos and stuff. Yeah. And because you just have all this time in your hands, you have time to think, like, wouldn't it be great if I bought that old Beverly Cleary book that I read as a kid and flipped through it and looked at it? And, because before, I had my office, but it wasn't decked out. It had usable things in it, but now...
It had a few memorabilia, but mostly it was functional.
You look behind me right now, there's hundreds of things behind me. I just bought, I just showed you that Frank from It's Always Sunny. I was, the other day, we're still in pandemic, I'm looking at my stuff, and I'm like, you know what? I don't have anything on this.
You have Game of Thrones. You have a little bit of...
I have Star Trek.
I have
Battlestar Galactica. I have
Stranger Things.
Star Blazers.
Happy Days.
Bionic Woman.
Yeah. And music that you love.
Yeah. But I didn't have any It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and so I bought a little trinket for that. Yeah. But yeah, completely can relate to you, Allison, and can relate also to the feeling of joy when something would arrive.
I bought a teeny little booklet that came in toys. So I didn't buy the toy, but it was an 80s toy. That was these little, you might remember them. They were these little robots with suction cups at the bottom. And they had like different kinds and stuff. But the booklet it came with had a little story. And I found it on eBay and I just bought the booklet for like 15 bucks or something.
That's funny.
And it gave me so much joy because I got it and I'm like, oh my God.
I remember this.
I remember this.
Yeah, yeah. What about, so two things. That at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was talking about, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to read those books I always wanted to read. I'm going to get that project done. So there's that question. The other question is, did you find yourself, as Allison was saying, eating more fast food?
Oh, I went the other direction. And it's because I had that health scare.
Right.
So I actually became like
uber healthy.
even more of a uber healthy eater. And I say even more. So the thing that happened to me, 6 years ago, I went in for blood tests and they were bad. So I kind of flipped a bit. I did all this diet research for months and became an amateur dietologist. And I really changed my diet. I went on an exercise program. And 9 months later, I had reversed all these bad numbers. But then over the years, what started happening is like, look, you can be a vegan if all you eat is sugar and oil. That's technically a vegan. But of course, that'll kill you. So what started happening is I still had really bad patterns, even though I was eating technically healthy foods. One of my horrible patterns is on the way home from work, I would stop at a bar, get two drinks and appetizers.
Which
then
bar?
Go home
Which bar would you go to? In my head, because you've told the story before, I always imagine it's by the Olive Garden in Totem Lake.
No, it's actually in downtown Kirkland by the water.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those are some nice bars.
Nice places. Yeah. And so it wasn't like cheap, crappy food.
Yeah.
But,
like Hector's is down there.
Yeah, I would go to the Slip.
Okay.
And I would go to Bovina.
Okay.
Love those places. But anyways, then I'd come home and eat dinner. So I was gaining pounds. I was getting unhealthy and stuff. But when the pandemic started, I started ordering really good food, cooking my own stuff and like really being like, careful with it. And so I kind of went the opposite route.
What about the, I'm going to get something done during the pandemic?
Oh, definitely. Like I said, I reorganized my whole, so when the pandemic started, my room that I used for my videos and the podcast when we were doing remotely was a mess. There was stuff in there. I couldn't actually use it.
Oh, really?
Because I had put stuff in there.
Oh.
So I went through a full reorg, full rewiring, got all the stuff, cleaned it up, decorated it, all these things. Also, it sounds trivial, but you know that it's not. My closet, I went through a full gutting, like just threw away so much stuff and just reorganized everything. And yeah, I was super productive in those first few months of the pandemic. I made videos. I was at work. I was so productive staying at home. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Then later in the year, it started getting harder, both because, the pandemic wears on you, and then I got really sick. So I got hurt.
Yeah, I had a similar thing, but, cleaning and getting some projects done. But the YouTube channel became basically a whole other full-time job.
Right.
And so if it's one project that I guess, if someone in 5 years are like, what did you get done during the pandemic? And I'd be like, well,
a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I created a YouTube channel and posted 2 or 3 videos a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
El Danell followed up on Facebook fan page and says, replying to Allison, I've gone overboard on the online spending. I think it's been a way to feel like I'm taking part in things still, or assert identity through my style and consumer choices. I've had to really think about why I'm making some purchases because I'm trying to be a more considerate consumer. Did you ever do that, like as a way of trying to assert your identity? Because when we're out in the world, we're able to assert our identity more easily, I suppose.
Probably. I wasn't aware of it, but probably.
Because some of the things like the comic books and
That's right. You know, I heard the statistic that if you combine, I think it's the prior 2 or 3 years, I think it's 3 years of Amazon revenue, the 2020 equaled those years.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Because I was buying the littlest of things. I'd be like, oh, I need that multivitamin.
Right.
Be like, well, buy it on Amazon. Normally you'd buy it in the store.
Yeah, no, same. Constant.
All right. Gripes of wrath, Berto.
Ooh. Gripes of wrath. It's been a bit.
I got 2 that are related. People who pronounce Nevada wrong. Drives me bonkers.
Do I pronounce it wrong? Let's see. You mean like Nevada?
That's wrong.
That's wrong. Nevada. Yeah, I pronounce it wrong. Nevada.
So
Nevada.
You get an excuse because you speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And
no, but why? Because the vowel would be Nevada.
Oh, it would?
Nevada. The correct, by the way, maybe you should be ashamed too, because the correct pronunciation would be Nevada.
Nevada. Yeah. So it's a part of old Mexico.
Yeah.
So obviously.
But somehow I still say Nevada.
Why do you say Nevada?
Because I assume incorrectly that words up here are meant to be pronounced with English pronunciation. So like I'll see.
Canada is not Canada.
Oh, sure.
So why is it Nevada?
Nevada. Well, because I never heard someone say Nevada. I always heard people say Canada. So.
Well, it's Nevada. It's always been Nevada. People in Nevada pronounce it Nevada.
But it's not Nevada. It's Nevada.
Right. So again, if you're Spanish speaking, you get a pass. But when we have white Americans saying Nevada, including Donald Trump, by the way, calls it Nevada.
How do you say Albuquerque?
Albuquerque.
It's Albuquerque.
Right. But by the way, Donald Trump, 2016, pronounced it Nevada. And then people in Nevada said, Donald Trump, you're pronouncing it wrong. And then he said, no, you're pronouncing it wrong.
Of course he did. How do you say Los Angeles?
Los Angeles.
Should be Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
San Diego, not San Diego.
But in that,
I say Nevada.
Right. So I get it. If you're going to go full Spanish on me,
right,
then never go full Spanish.
Well, I say Las Vegas instead of Las Vegas. I say Las Vegas.
What are you saying?
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas?
Let's go to Las Vegas.
Las Vegas?
Yeah.
As opposed to what?
Las Vegas.
It's Las Vegas. Anyway, again, if you're going to go full Spanish, then you get a pass. But again, there's a lot of non-Spanish speaking white Americans who are calling it Nevada, and my speculation is that the vowel like Nevada sounds low class to people. And so people like Donald Trump,
Nevada,
it sounds better. It sounds more pleasing to their ear because it sounds more like European if you're like Nevada.
Yeah.
If you had a skincare line, you wouldn't call it Nevada. You'd call it Nevada, right? If you had a line of yoga pants, you would call them, Nevada. You would call it Nevada, but it's Nevada.
It's yoga pants.
So people pronounce, when people say Pike's Market, for example, instead of Pike Place Market, that is grating on my ears, but I don't judge the people saying it because they don't know any better. Someone says Spokane, Washington, for example.
Spokane.
Or Puyallup.
Sure.
I get it. They don't know. It's a weird word. They don't know how to pronounce it. They're giving it their best shot. But when people say Nevada, I think they are trying to sound more sophisticated than, they have an insecurity that they're trying to, when I was a kid, I learned French, and French sound fancy to me, and I learned that you could say garbage. And so I started calling it garbage because I wanted to sound more, I don't know, smart or something.
So I always say garage for garage.
Why?
Because there's a Elton John song where he says, the garage by the motorway. And so he says kind of like garage And so it sounds like garage. And so I always start saying garage. Me and Mitch say garage.
The other state that bugs me is Oregon.
Oregon. I say Oregon.
Yeah, that's right. Oregon.
Okay.
Oregon. It's Oregon.
But people say Oregon?
Yeah, they go Oregon.
Oregon.
Portland,
Ooh,
Oregon.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And I would venture to say half of Americans, particularly on the East Coast, pronounce it Nevada and Oregon. And it drives me nuts. Now, okay, on some level, I'm like, well, no one pronounces like Worcestershire right, or, you know, there's certain...
I've told you this story. When I lived in Worcester when I was little. And
you did?
Oh, yeah. When I was 2, I was in Massachusetts, lived in Worcester. And, you know, when I asked my daddy, like, where do we live, Daddy? He would tell me with his thick Colombian, well, you know, accent, he would say, Oostern, right? And I was like, oh, wait, I live in Oostern. Okay. So I grew up. And I would tell people, like, where did you, I used to live in Oostern. And, you know, people that knew were like, Oostern? I don't, and not only that, I years later went on a trip to the East Coast. I was going to New Hampshire, and I wanted to find where I lived on the map. And I'm looking for Oostern, 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 no Oostern. And I'm like, did I go crazy? And I asked my dad, Dad, where did we live? He's like, Oostern. There is no Oostern. He's like, there is an Oostern. And randomly, I forget who, someone said to me, I wonder if you mean Worcester. And I'm like, well, yeah, Worcester. No, it's Worcester. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, but I can't find it on the map. Oh, yeah. It's like spelled like Worcester. And I'm like, what? Who? Why? How? So you want to hear a grapes of wrath? Gripes of wrath is freaking, why would you call something Worcester when it's spelled Worcester sauce? Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's bad policy.
Yeah. Anonymous patron wrote in and she says, are most men socialized to be somewhat sexist even in 2021? I'm dating now, and my instinct is to immediately end things if a guy says any joke or comment that puts women down. Should I be challenging and educating them instead of just leaving them? Are most men socialized to be somewhat sexist even in 2021, and does it excuse it? Berto, what do you think?
On the first part, yeah, of course we're socialized to be sexist. I mean, I say of course. To me, at this point in my life, I think it's obvious. It wouldn't have been obvious for me the whole time. On the second part, I don't think I hate this all or nothing zero tolerance policy we've got going on both sides. Like, and what I mean by both sides is, look, I do think that there are lines in the sand where when you cross them, as a society, we have to be done with you. Even if we still have empathy, we have to be done with you.
Cancel.
Cancel as in you're going to jail for life because you murdered someone, you know, that kind of thing. Or, you know, you abused a whole bunch of people. You are going to jail for a long time, and we are going to be done with you. We are going to have empathy as a society that everyone's a human being and blah, 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 but we're going to put you away. Okay. At the same time, I think...
What about Woody Allen? Is Woody Allen in that camp?
That's unclear because we don't have proof, you know. There's no proof. You know how I feel. I think he did it. I'm done with him personally, but like with other people, there's proof, there's court cases, there's things. Okay.
Well, there's proof because the victim said it happened.
And that's why I believe it.
There's no videotape.
But there's no court adjudication either. So, but my point is this, like, I actually think we are too quick to close the door on people. So for example, you know, a guy at work, a woman walks by and the guy like says something about how they're dressed, like complimentary, like, wow, you look really nice today. Okay. In today's workplace, that's not acceptable.
It was never acceptable.
No. Come on, that's a joke. People thought it was acceptable for sure.
Well, okay. It was never okay.
Yeah, but we didn't know. No one knew.
Right.
And so in today's workplace, I don't think everyone knows, but most people should know, and they should have gone to the classes that tell them that it's not okay. But here's the thing. If someone does that, I don't think the right thing is to be like, you're fired. I think the right thing is to educate that person. And that's how I feel about these borderline cases. So in the case, I don't know what kind of jokes we're talking about, but if you have a boyfriend and they say something that's a little offensive,
she's saying, I'm dating.
Yeah, you're dating, and then they say something that's sexist. In my opinion, don't be a one strike you're out kind of person. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know what the joke was. I don't know how egregious it was, but I would mostly say, like, why don't you try to see if they react well to an education? If they don't, well, then maybe that's your answer.
Yeah. Yeah. So to answer your question, are most men socialized to be somewhat sexist? Yes. Not most, all. Not every man, everybody of every gender is socialized in our society to be sexist. It's when you live in a sexist society, it just happens. And then your other question of, should I be leaving them or should I be challenging them or should I do nothing? It's up to you. And if you want to leave them, then go for it. It's your life. It's your dating preference. And if you want to weed people out because of red flags of sexism, I think that's perfectly valid. If you want to do as Berto is saying and educate them and use that as a litmus test, that's also your call. But I think your question, Anonymous Patron, is, as I'm starting, you're like, well, I'm starting to date and I'm bumping into a fair amount of sexism. If I become hard sort of lined around this, I don't think I'm going to be able to date anyone because everyone I'm coming into contact with has this problem. And I'll say that's possible. And what do we do about that? I don't know. That's a tough one.
Do you remember the book/movie Disclosure, Michael Crichton? The movie had Michael Douglas in it and Demi Moore.
I vaguely remember the premise.
It was set in Seattle.
It was like a sex harassment at work. Yeah.
But it was Demi Moore doing the harassment.
Right.
So by today's standards, it's easy to look at that movie as like, oh, sure, you're going to have a movie about sexual harassment, but of course it's the woman doing it. But I rewatched it 2 nights ago, and I'm like, and I read the book at the time, and I was like, you know what? This was a very ahead of its time movie because it actually treated even Michael Douglas, they showed him sexually harassing his secretary in a small way, but he would pat her butt with his papers as she walked by.
Jeez.
And that was brought up because she was brought in to testify, and she's like, yeah, he does inappropriate things. And she actually didn't mean to testify against him, but she was saying, and there was this beautiful moment in the movie where he actually apologizes to her. Now, the follow-up to that scene sends the wrong message because then as he's walking away, she pats his butt in the back with her papers.
Oh my God.
And it was meant to be like, hey, I get it. We can all do it. No, but that's the wrong idea, right? And then there were, but it was a product of its time. But the flip side is that it made this point that the abuse is about power. And I thought it was really interesting. The book was actually pretty good. It was one of his better books. So I thought of that because that's a movie that if you made the same exact movie today, it would not do well. I don't even know if it did well at the time, but it would fall really flat. But at the time,
I think it did really well because we were on the coattails of the Judge Thomas, Clarence.
Right, Clarence. By the way, one of the people in that movie is Dennis. He's a comedian who turned really right-winger.
Yeah, Dennis...
Leary? No,
the other Dennis.
Yeah,
from SNL.
Yeah, that guy.
SNL Dennis Miller.
Dennis Miller, thank you. So I used to really like that guy in the way that I used to like Tom Likas, because he was kind of a no-nonsense guy and stuff. But in that movie, he is playing that role of like the bro, saying like, "Come on, now you can't even do this, now you can't even do that," and he's like.
Maybe that role got a little too up. You got into his head too much.
I think so. Yeah, I almost felt like he was playing that perspective himself.
Right. Up it's your patron Gwen from Indiana says, "I am a senior software developer at a female tech content creator, and I would like to know your thoughts on how to deal with all the negative comments online. My career is going very well, and I am often complimented about my work. I enjoy live streaming my programming and making videos about, so basically it sounds like she does live streams on YouTube about developing software.
Yeah.
But when I live stream content and post YouTube videos, I am getting more and more hateful comments, people going out of their way to be mean about me being a girl who shouldn't be in software dev, or that I am so stupid, or other things much worse than that. I've posted some really popular videos on other YouTube channels as well as my own, and it makes me feel so good until I read the negative comments, and I feel like I should just quit everything. I don't know why it's difficult to just ignore the negative comments. Even if I delete the comments, they are still stuck in my mind, and it erodes my confidence and my self-worth. Is there a good system that you use to overcome the negativity you receive? Berto, what do you think?
First of all, I'm so sorry to hear that. Like, that sucks. To be a minority in a field and then do great in that field, and then instead of like just, you know, receiving praise for the great work you do,
or just neutral, just like,
no, if you do great work, you deserve praise.
yeah, but at the very least, how about you're just like, well, not for me.
Oh, fine. But I'm saying instead of that, like, you get crap.
Yeah.
Okay. So look, I am someone who is a little maybe outside the norm. So I don't know if you can take this and run with it, but here is what I've done. Because when trust me, I've seen some really negative things about me in the past in the comments. I always actually feel a little sorry for the person posting. And maybe that's me being condescending. Maybe that's my narcissism or whatever. But I oftentimes feel sorry because I am like, well, your life is so small in this sense. Like, this is what you're doing. You're sitting here railing against me, calling me this, that, and this is what you're doing. And I feel bad about that, you know? And that actually makes me feel not as bad about me. You know, I'm like, well, I feel more bad about you than I feel about what you just said about me. Where it doesn't work so well is when I first started playing music, I was really insecure. And I would go after the show and I would do this thing where I wanted to ask how it went, but I didn't want to hear it or ask. So I'd be like, first I would just stand by someone. I'm like, whew, that was quite a show. Just like standing there. And I'm waiting for them to say something. And I don't want them to say anything. And then
sometimes that person would have been me.
Yeah, and inevitably there'd be this awkwardness like, hey, well, interesting show. Or someone might say great show. If they said great show, I'd be like, oh, no, it was terrible. Oh man, I sucked. You know, which I learned later that sucks to do that.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that to people.
Yeah.
You invalidate their comment. You make them feel like shit. So I learned not to do that. And it's been a process for me. Nowadays, when I get a compliment at work or whatever, I actually wait a moment. I take a pause and then I say, thank you. That means a lot. You know, I actually, like, I've worked hard on that, you know.
Yeah, because it does mean a lot.
But at the time, I'd be like, no. If they gave me a compliment, I'm like, no, I sucked. But if, on the other hand, they said nothing or they were like, oh, you know, whatever, then I would get really quiet. I'm like, oh, okay. And then walk away and be super hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me think about when I, back in the day, would record albums of my own music.
Yeah.
Maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, or every other year, I would record a full, like, 15, 20 song album.
Yeah.
Of just where I was at musically at that time, and I would send it out to all of my people.
Yeah.
At the beginning it was cassettes, and then later on it was CDs. You know, because this is before the internet, so
right.
You can't just like post it on stuff.
No.
So I would, and then I would have to burn all the CDs, which that costs a lot of money back in the day. I would get art,
right.
and I would,
and you get excited.
Yeah,
because it's your CD, man.
And I would make a list of like 100 people, like every relative, all my friends, all, you know, just I had this list of 100 people ish that I would send it to, and I would have to get their address, and I would have to get the packaging and pay for the postage. It was expensive, you know, it was a big deal, and I'd send it out to everyone, and and you know, one or two people would get back to me like, hey, it's good. You know, I listened to that song. That was pretty cool. I listened to that song. That was pretty interesting. And, you know, and I was just elated, you know, that right. Someone would listen and would have like something interesting to say. Now, were they probably like, oh, I got to listen to this thing and
say something.
Yeah, say something. I guess so. But that happens to me too.
Yeah,
you know, like when people do that for me, I always go out of my way to compliment people, or
Like
at the very least, just to say, like, I listened to it. Thank you for sharing. You know,
like you didn't have to listen to a cover of "Get Your Motor Running," you know, but you did, and you complimented me.
But it was good. Berto is in a old guy band, a cover band, and they did a song from the 60s. But anyway, I would also get some people that would say nothing. And that always hurt me, because I'm thinking, this is probably the meaning of my life.
And if you gave me something, I would care.
Yeah. Right. That I spent the entire year, because back then, right, there's no internet.
Yeah.
So your audience is literally just people who are around you.
Of course.
So if you make something like an art piece,
you're giving them a Horcrux. That's a piece of you.
And that people would just not say anything, or they'd come to a show.
Yeah.
And after the show, you know, we'd run into each other, and they'd just be like, "Hey, yeah, so," and they just start talking about themselves.
Exactly.
And I'm like,
and you're like, I just played.
Yeah. So again, I don't need you to pump my ego, but
can you just acknowledge?
But just acknowledge that I'm doing this for you.
Good job, man.
I'm not just. I think that non-performers, maybe,
right,
they think that I'm up on stage, or I am making this CD for myself.
Yeah.
And you're just this innocent bystander who is being subjected to it.
Right.
No, I am specifically giving this to you, and saying, please acknowledge that I have given it to you.
Yeah, this is my bit.
You don't have to like it, but just acknowledge that this was for you.
Yeah.
Like there were 95 people on my list, and I was thinking about you when I was actually recording this. I wasn't, you know.
And everyone else gives what? Like, I bought this pencil at the store for you. I bought this like cup holder. You made music.
Yeah, art. Like, and it comes from my heart. And so, most people wouldn't. Most people, they wouldn't acknowledge it, or they would be like, "Oh yeah, I listened to it anyway." Moving on with life, as if it just had no bearing. And again, I always knew, well, look, not everyone's going to be into my music. Not everyone even likes my style of music, and that's fine. But at least, like, say, well, because again, it wasn't something I was doing on the side. This was the central reason why I felt like I was on the planet.
Yeah,
you know, this was all of me. That my job partially was just so I could fund this other thing. And anyway, so
one last thing I'll say is, I have also found, in times where I was severely criticized, for example, at work, and where internally I actually knew that they were wrong, at a fundamental high level, they were wrong. But I did a deal with myself to still try to benefit from the situation.
Yeah.
And I tried to look at it from their perspective, and I was like, well, I don't like this. I kind of hate this person right now. And I actually disagree with their assessment, but I'm going to put myself in their shoes for a second and be like, what are they seeing? What is this? And actually it did help me, because there were things about me that, again, I still think, let me put it this way. The person in this case was very senior in this team. And I knew enough to know that at their level and at their seniority level, what they needed to do is coach me a little bit and help me improve, instead of berate me and basically be completely toxic, right?
Yeah.
But I still was like, what's the grain of truth that I could benefit? Because I actually want to benefit from this. Because I don't want to give them the satisfaction of being put down. I want to be benefited.
Well, what if it's these comments on YouTube? It's just like unrelenting.
Right. Well, so I've done that. I actually, like, for example, in one of my videos, one of the people, this was a video I did, a reaction to the space launch, one of those videos. And, you know, I'm not a NASA person. You're sure I love science and stuff, but I wasn't trying to do a scientific commentary. You know, I was just kind of reacting to it. Most people got that. One person kind of went off on me. Like, you didn't do any research. You don't understand this. You made a comment about why there's so much blue in the computer screen. And of course I was like making funny comments like, what's the deal with all the blue? I wasn't like, but they were like taking it seriously. Like, if you knew anything, you would know blah. I'm like, oh God. And so I was annoyed, and I was like, this is frustrating because I'm not making this for you. But that I did put myself in their shoes for a second. I was like, oh, okay. See, I know I didn't explicitly make this for you, but you are a YouTube user. You come across content and you're seeing someone reacting to something you care about. And so you wanted content of the kind you care about. Now I don't do that content. And now you've learned, hopefully you don't come back to my shop. But one thing I took away is like, I got to remember that I actually have to be transparent with what I am and what I'm not. And that helps viewers decide so that they don't waste their time with me. And then it helps me find my niche. If I try to be too paper thin or like spread myself too thin to be like, I'm everything to everyone, it's not going to work. And I'm going to send the wrong message. So even that comment, I was like, okay, I need to take this a little bit. But it's easy to only take the negative and then self-doubt and be like, maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe whatever. And it's too easy to do that. What I have tried to do is be like, I'm not going to give them the satisfaction. I'm going to benefit from this exchange. What can I learn? What can I do?
Yeah, that's great. I think you have to have a tremendous amount of differentiation and self-worth to be able to do that, because if you didn't, it would be hard to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as with Berto saying, Gwen, I'm so sorry you're going through this. On behalf of men, I apologize to you. How do you overcome it? Here are my 3 or 4 tips. One or options. One is don't read them. I personally will take breaks from the comments every now and then because it gets into your head.
Yeah.
Even if it's absurd or they're even just sort of mildly critical. You know, they might be just mildly critical on something else. It gets into my head. The analogy that I give to people is that when you're giving a presentation to 30 people.
Yeah.
And imagine if 5 people in the back, the entire time as you're talking, is grimacing and standing up and they're talking loudly like, what is this person talking about? And you could conceptualize those 5 people and say, well, I'm not for them, or they're kind of weird.
They're still disrupting you.
But they're getting into your skull.
Yeah.
And all the people in the front who are digging what you're saying, they're just quietly paying attention.
Yeah.
They're not in a constant thing of like, oh my God, you're so great.
Yeah.
They're just quietly enjoying you. But you have these 5 people in the back. You would not, there is not a single presenter on the planet that would be able to withstand that kind of, you can't do that. And that's what being on the internet is like. You have this audience, the audience is the comments section. And even if it's 2% of the people talking, it's a lot of people and it gets into your head.
Yeah.
And even in intellectual, you're like, this is only 2%. Our brain is designed to pay attention to that because we're very interested in not being rejected. So we don't listen to the acceptance, we listen to the lack of acceptance. And so one of the options is just don't read them. A lot of famous people don't read comments. Yeah. Conan O'Brien, for example, like he talks about on his podcast, he doesn't read anything.
You know, okay, so
and he's one of the most beloved people on the planet.
I have 2 thoughts on that one, because on the one hand, I've heard this about some artists that have always been uncompromising. I think it takes a special kind of vision, and maybe you get a little lucky from the start that your vision just happens to be that good. But I think even Conan, they must have had a way to refine their craft with some sort of feedback loop, right?
Right.
So like either they tape themselves or they ask their trusted advisors or something.
So I'll just take me, for example. There are times when I don't read any comments, but I'm my best critic. So I will watch one of my videos and I'll be like, that was really dumb. Or I'm saying the word literally too much. Or that thing with my head is stupid. I need to stop doing that. Or Stacy, my wife, will tell me, You need to not do that anymore. So there's a lot you can get from just yourself, because you're pretty, you know, I don't know about you, Berto, but I'm pretty critical of myself when I watch myself.
So I am critical. And I used to, when I first started playing out, I would always tape my performances and I would always watch them.
Yeah.
And I definitely was critical. But years later, I found out that my criticisms, you can only be as critical as you have the wisdom to be. So my criticisms were all around certain areas, like, you're standing kind of funny, or you're looking down a lot. Ooh, your voice cracked there. You know, these kinds of things. But there was an area of criticism that I was blind to. And it was at the time, this was with, not with you, it was way before you. It was with my first incarnation of missionary. It's like, we'd play out. And at first I was like, okay, this is working well. We're getting a little bit of audience participation. Great. But some songs, I would notice people like tune out. And my conclusion was like, they're just not into music as much as I am.
Right. Well, so along those lines, the analogy is you're watching the audience,
yeah,
and the engagement on their face,
right,
the eye contact or whatever, the body language. And so that's one form of contact.
Right.
Attention, garnering eyes and attention. The other is verbal feedback from the crowd, where they critique what you've said or done. The same goes on YouTube.
Yeah.
There's the verbal critique in the comments, but then there's the actual
likes and the number of views.
The number of views and the likes, right?
Yeah.
That I look at because it's hard not to see that.
Yeah, and that's a fair point, because but I was blind. That, you know, when I go back and I listen to the kind of songs I was playing back then, I realize, oh, it would be hard for a lot of people to relate to some of these songs, because although they have catchy moments melodically, I'm saying things that I'm even having a hard time parsing, even though I wrote them. So it took me years to realize, oh no, I don't write relatable or whatever. And it was a journey for me and stuff like that. Some people come out the gate saying, I want to do it this way, like a Prince or something, and I'm uncompromising, but the way I do it is genius, and everyone will know it's genius.
Right.
I'm not like that.
Right.
I need refinement.
Right. For Conan, he talks about this in his podcast a lot, that he will take feedback and people will give him feedback, but he just won't read comments or reviews.
And that's fair.
It's a different thing. Yeah. And to be clear to all the listeners out there, I do read the comments often.
Yeah.
And Stacy, the podwife, will forward, you know, I don't have time, honestly, to read all the comments sometimes, but the podwife will go through the comments and like send stuff to me or Bob or Berto.
Dude, the episodes we do, honestly, and I just skimmed through it, but like there's so many positive comments.
Yeah.
That even though I come across mildly like, because the benefit is that you have a worse problem, I think, because you have a broader YouTube audience and your videos probably land on the laps of a lot of people that are not, you know, it's just a broader audience, right? The people that listen usually to our podcasts, they tend to be a little bit more of them, more invested in the thing.
Right.
So I get more benefit from looking at that, because I'm like, I see all these comments, I'm like, oh, thank you for being so open about this. And honestly, even when they're like, oh, Berto was so sexist or so whatever, right? I like take something from it, you know, because it's like, I don't know. But to be fair,
I think you're different than me, man. I
am a bit.
If I get a negative thing,
it like really affects you.
Yeah, like if it's 1 out of 100, there'll be 100 glowing things, and then one negative thing, and I won't be able to sleep at night. I mean, I'm exaggerating.
Yeah, no, but
it'll rattle around in my head for a few days. Like when I'm brushing my teeth, that comment will go, and I'll have this little argument in my head about what they said.
I wonder if it's because I am even more narcissistic than you. There is that part of me that has always had this internal defense mechanism, which is, but I'll show them.
Yeah, okay. I'll show them.
And I'll show them. I don't know when I'll show them. Maybe when I'm 90, I'll show them.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to resort to that, but it doesn't work. You know, there's a podcast I listen to, TBTL, and one of the things that one of the guys, Luke, he'll say when he gets a negative, he hasn't said this in a while, but he'll say, yeah, how's your podcast going? Because, you know, their podcast is really popular. Sure. They make their living from it. And, okay, you can criticize this thing, but
how's yours doing?
How's yours going?
Yeah.
How is your content provision going?
Yeah.
You can criticize me all you want, but look where I am and look where you are.
Right.
And Luke would do that sort of thing. And I don't know, that just doesn't work for me.
For me, it was a kind of thing where, you know, I think part of it was, so I'm sitting there in that, I've told you, a private school where most of these kids are very privileged and they come from money, all these things. And so I always kind of had this thing of like, yeah, I know, but I'll show you one day, you know? And it morphed over time because at the time it was literally, I'll show you. Like,
do you feel like you have shown them?
It changed. I realized at one point, I'm like, oh, I see. I don't have to show them. You know?
Is there a 7-year-old, 10-year-old inside of you?
I feel very accomplished. I feel like, look, I mean, the stuff I had to overcome and then still have a meaningful, successful life is a lot, and I'm proud of it.
If you hadn't had achieved and you were working, you know, at a less prestigious minimum wage job or something, would that still be jabbing you in the side?
I don't know, because even when I've been down, like when I was so inundated by debt because of my decisions, I still was like, I'll show me. I'll show me. I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe things would be different. I know there's a lot of luck involved in life, but I don't know. I just always had that little chip on my shoulder, like, yeah, I know, I hear you. And actually, the person that I heard was me, because just like you said, you're a harsh critic. I'm a harsh critic. And I'd be not always about everything that maybe other people were criticizing me, but that was part of it. You know what would happen is, I remember I went into music class in Colombia, and they were auditioning people to sing in some like show or something, some performance. And I went in and sang, and the teacher's like, oh no, that does, like, he said something really mean, like that didn't work. And I remember one of the boys in the class, like, oh my God, your voice is terrible. Like, they said that. But in the moment, what's going through my head is, A, I feel off today, so of course you're gonna say that. B, the two girls in my class that love to hear me sing and always request songs don't agree with you. And I was like, you know, like just kind of running in my mind the inventory of counter arguments, right? And then the second thing is, I've always felt like I never put in the work. So I always had this excuse, and maybe that's weak, but I always had this excuse like, yeah, but I've also not applied myself. You know, like this.
This is me with my hands
10%.
tied behind
yeah,
my...
no, but seriously. So like, for example, it would be like, I didn't get first place in that one competition. I'm like, I know, but I stopped studying a week ago. You know, like that kind of thing. Now, it was a defense mechanism to like justify, but it always kind of carried me through the moments. I was like, yeah, I know, but I could have done better if I had worked harder. And that, I think, is important. It's like, it's on me, not on them. I could do better if I work harder.
Interesting. Yeah. So other things you can do to, back on the not reading comments topic is, there was a time for a few months ago where, and we even talked about this, Berto, off air, where, at least for me, and I thought for you a little bit too, you and I were reading a lot more comments back then, and were, I thought, becoming really shy on microphone, where our flow, our vibe, our, you know, being in the zone,
yeah,
was our mojo was waning because of what I thought to be too many comments being read.
So I know we had that conversation, you brought that up. I'm not going to deny that maybe that was a factor. The thing that's confusing for me is during that same time frame is when I had been really struggling with my health.
Right.
And so I can't tell, like, I know one of the days we recorded, I brought everything I could to that recording, but I was feeling like shit,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So, okay. So that,
Yeah.
so maybe 100% that was you. And honestly,
at least part of it.
And honestly, for me, my health hasn't been very good over the past year. It seems to be getting better, but.
Oh, and by the way, maybe the fact that I was and you were struggling with health, the comments hurt more.
Yeah, maybe.
So that's part of it, you know?
But yeah, but for me, it was at least 50% comments rattling around in my head. And I was a worse podcaster because of it. And I could feel it. Yeah, I could feel myself second guessing everything I was about to say.
Well, after we had that conversation, I basically, I went down by at least 60% on my comment reading.
Okay.
Like after we had that conversation, because what I've done recently is whenever we post one of our podcasts together, I'll go open it up to listen to how it sounded. I always like listening to the intros, and I will look at the likes, you know.
What do you mean you like listening to the intros?
I just like the intros. I don't know why.
Wait, you or me? You?
Oh, I just like our banter at the beginning.
Oh,
usually,
okay.
You know. Anyways, and then sometimes I actually want to rehear a portion because I'm like, yeah, what did we talk about?
Yeah.
But then what I'll do is I'll quickly scan through comments, and I am selfishly what I'm trying to look for is
do people like me?
Do people like me? But and I'm trying to be honest about this in a way that I'm trying to make sure that I am bringing the right balance to the podcast. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to make sure that it's not, because, you know, it is true. When we first started this thing, I was completely unguarded, freewheeling. I would say whatever. Well,
not when we first started.
Well,
but when we got into the swing of things.
But then you actually would have to try to draw some boundaries, and you say, you know what? Let's not do this, or let's stop that topic, or let's move this way.
And I would literally edit out whole sections.
Because left to my own devices, it was like, you know, wild horses. Now, over the years, I myself started self-moderating.
Yeah.
And I learned, and so you probably started to not have to moderate me as much, and that was good.
True.
Yeah. So my main goal now...
And asterisks on that, Berto, which I've noticed, and we never had a formal conversation about that in our 13 years, and that's what makes you such a good podcaster.
Nice.
I have had, we've talked about this before, but I've had a lot of people on this podcast, and other co-hosts for that matter, and no one even compares to you. Nothing compares to you. Speaking of Prince, who knows what I want without me having to say. Like I can lob the ball over the plate and you will hit it every time.
I can lick it. Oh wait, hit it.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to look for is, are they finding me useful? Because if I can be useful, then I'm useful.
Interesting.
And that's always stemmed from me being honest about me. And that's where...
Well, what do you mean by useful? Like what would a comment indicate to you? Ooh, like, this person thinks...
I really appreciate that you opened up about blah. So like the spending one. Literally like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad Berto opened up about this. I totally have this problem. That's what I live for.
What would be another useful acknowledgement?
For example... Oh, in fact, I forget which episode it was, but it was really refreshing to hear Berto being honest about his his like bad ideas about women and other things when he was younger, and how he's evolved and blah blah blah, and something along those lines. That's what I do this for, because I've always kind of felt like. I want to make mistakes so you don't have to. That's the thing. I said that on my videos too. I'm like, that's what I'm hoping I can tell you. Here's the thing I did, or here's the thing I'm doing now. Let's see if we can avoid this together.
So in contrast to what you're saying before, that you would say, I'm going to show you, what you're saying now is kind of in opposition to that.
That's true. It's like, no, and that's absolutely true. Because now, you know, when I was in my 20s, if we had started this podcast, I would have just been a jokester. But I wouldn't have opened up the same way, because I would have been embarrassed about so many topics. Yeah. As I grew a little older, I started realizing, oh, the things I thought were embarrassing or problematic are the things that make me me. And someone might want to learn about that, right? And so now I actually enjoy telling you all these embarrassing stories, because I'm like, yeah, that's me, and hopefully someone can learn from that. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it does. It adds a lot.
Yeah. So you're right. It's the opposite of I'll show you. It's like I'll tell you.
The other tactic you can use for managing comments is to conceptualize the people. Berto was kind of mentioning this. One thing to remember, Gwen from Indiana, upper tier patron Gwen, is that the percentage of psychopaths and sadists on the internet are a lot higher than you will experience in the everyday world. Research shows psychopaths and sadists are much more likely to comment online in a negative way because there's no social consequence for them getting their rocks off by hurting other people. They're not going to get a slap in the face because it's anonymous on the internet. And so one conceptualization is, particularly if someone is really going after you and trying to hurt your feelings on it's obviously that they're trying to do that, is to be like, that could literally be a psychopath, and I don't have to regard what they're saying.
No. In fact, it's kind of dangerous.
Yeah. The other is that hurt people, right? So when someone's really blasting you, now it's one thing criticism, like, I don't like this, or you could have done that differently. Like sometimes when we do email episodes, like today, kind of, there's always someone in the comments section that's like, could you please give timestamps? Because they want to be able to skip to things. And I'll tell you, everyone out there are so many tedious tasks involved with posting an episode. One prepping for an episode, planning an episode, recording an episode, posting it, that is the straw on the camel's back. I cannot, I don't want to.
I've seen some commenters do it for you. Yeah.
Which if you do, upvote those people so that
highly appreciate it.
Gets, for a while, I was hoping that someone would just take it on themselves, that they would do it every time, because it wouldn't be that hard for someone to put a comment. But anyway, so hurt people, and you can look at some comments as when they're hurting you of just saying, well, obviously that person must be hurting quite a bit.
Yeah. That's similar to when I was saying that I feel some sadness for the person, you know.
The other is that there's a lot of brainwashed misogynists out there, particularly in the tech world. They're a victim of the misogyny rhetoric and are parroting ideas that they were not born with.
Right.
So you can look at them and say, like, well, obviously you live in an echo chamber and it's not your fault. And I do that all the time. People will say things to me ideologically that I'll say, whoa, you are clearly, the metaphor or the visualization I have in my head is that almost like there's a membrane that is encapsulating, like a blob membrane that's encapsulating this echo chamber. And through the membrane, their head pops out and yells at me about something. And I'm looking at them, and they're stuck in this globule membrane. There's all these other people in there. And they're in there going like, the earth is flat. And then they submerge back beyond the membrane. And I don't look at that and go, oh, you're a rational human being who has a balanced point of view of the world. You're sad. You're a pod person. Yeah. And you emerged your head and shouted something at someone in the real world. And I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what misogyny is. Yeah. You know, it's sad. Someone emerges from the misogyny echo chamber and yells at you. It's like, how sad for you in your echo chamber of sadness.
One thing that could be very hard to do and may not be worth your time ultimately, but there could be people on the comments that are actually trying to give you constructive criticism.
Totally.
But they get drowned out by all these ridiculous people. For example, you know the Vlog Brothers.
Yeah. I got a book right behind me. Yeah. John Green.
So his brother,
Hank.
Hank, yeah. Wait, Hank is the one that wrote...
No, John.
John is the one that... Okay, so Hank, yeah. So they start all sorts of spin-off channels, as you know. And one of them that they started, this goes back maybe 2 years, they had this gal, and she did this video. And the video was... I actually forget the topic, but it was kind of a charged topic. It dealt a little bit with misogyny and stuff like this. But she did a really poor job. It was like her first video, and her voice was grating. She was everything ended in a question, and everything was like this, and you couldn't follow because her cadence was super frustrating. So it went terribly. The down votes were like massive, and everyone started jumping on the comments. Now, unfortunately, 80% of the comments were, "That's why you can't blah 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 woman," you know, like ridiculous misogyny, and really hating her, like, and you know, comments on her looks, everything, like it was terrible. And I felt so bad because I'm like, look, this is not a good video, and she needs to learn. And so I made a comment, and I don't know if anyone ever read it, but I was like, look, I'm so sorry you're going through this. These people are ridiculous. This is unacceptable. So please understand this has nothing to do with who you are as a person or gender or anything. But here's what I observe about the video that could be improved. And I just left some notes, and it was short. It was like, you know, do this, modulate this. Now, because I felt like, man, the video is actually not good, but if you could accidentally take away that people are just misogynist, right, and then you won't improve, and that sucks because then they'll be winning for the wrong fucking reason.
Right. Yeah, and side note, a lot of women content providers will be criticized because they have women voices, by the way. Like there'll be, because the content world, podcasting included, YouTube included, was 99% white guys. Yeah. And women would come along over the past 10 years and would start to add their voice, yeah, literal and figuratively, and would get this backlash because people are like, I don't like her voice, the way she talks in it, and there's a sexist element to it.
This was, if you had heard it, because by the way, she's improved night and day. Like if you listen to one of her videos now, yeah, she's a professional.
Yeah, I'm not saying your observation was wrong. I'm just saying that.
But
I just need to add that element.
No, and actually, you're absolutely right, because there are videos. There are a couple of podcasters, whatever, that do math videos, and they're women, and they're amazing videos. Yeah. They speak very well, eloquently. They actually have a really nice podcasting voice or whatever, and they make great content for math. Guess what? Still a ton of hate. Right. You know. Now they get a lot of positive comments, way more positive comments, but you'll scroll through and be like,
I don't like her voice.
It's even broader than that. It's like, oh, she sounds ditzy, you know, like stuff like that. God. And it's like she's talking about some like serious math topics. Yeah. And she just sounds like a woman, yeah, with a nice voice, by the way.
Yeah. She can't be smart because she's a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that that's real.
Right. We did a whole episode on Elizabeth Holmes and how she lowered her voice.
Yeah, that's right.
To get to counter that problem. The third tip I have for you, Gwen, is to vent to supportive people. Do not read one of those terrible comments and just sit on it. Talk to others. 95% of the energy can be dissipated for me when it's usually with the pod wife, we'll laugh about some terrible, hateful comment.
You've seen those videos where celebrities read tweets about them.
So you and I did that once. We read all
the negatives,
the negative reviews on iTunes, I think.
Yeah.
And we did that for some other thing too. But yeah, there's a certain liberation about that. And you learn, you know, like I know all the criticisms people have, you know, of me because I've read it so many times.
Sure.
And sometimes it's good just to read it out loud and say like, yeah, you know, and you said something great earlier that I want to highlight, which is the negative comments for me, I would imagine at least 50%, if not more, of the pain that I get from them is because I probably feel like I'm being caught in a lie instead of just saying, well, that's not who I am, you know, right, like what you were saying earlier. So someone comments and says, you got that detail wrong. You're an idiot. Read a book. Well, to be specific, sometimes you and I will do psychology of someone like Amy Winehouse or something. And, you know, I do a fair amount of research. I don't just wing it. I give it, but I'm not a scholar on Steve Jobs, for example. I'm not a scholar on, you know, Charlie Manson. I feel like I have a good grasp on the details, and I'll even say at the beginning, some of the details might be wrong, but the gist of it will be correct. And, you know, there'll be someone that'll say, oh, you got this detail wrong. You got so many things wrong. It's like you didn't even bother or something. And if I'm getting upset, it's usually because I feel like I've been trying to act like I am a scholar, or I do know everything.
Sure.
Or I did do a lot of prep when I didn't do a lot of prep. Whereas if I just say, well, I'm just a podcaster putting out literally 15 episodes a week, and I only have
Trust me, if I wanted to go deep, I would.
Well, but it would have taken me so long because the person commenting probably has been studying it their whole life and knows every detail. And so for me, I'm like, well, yeah, you're criticizing me on something that, yeah, absolutely, I get it, because that's not where I hold my pride. I don't take my pride in knowing every single detail about this famous person's life. That's not my thing, and it doesn't hurt as much.
And I wonder if this doesn't happen for you, because for me, the other thing is, by this point in my life, I know things that I'm just fundamentally, for whatever reason, not proficient at. For example, handiwork, doing stuff manually with my hands. There is some part of my brain that doesn't connect. So, you know, you
like
can
what, like fixing a toilet or something?
Yeah. Oh God, you just scared the hell out of me. Like, listen, you can be like, what are you going to do for fun tonight, Berto? And an honest idea of fun would be, I'm going to go home and write, like figure out how to make a maze in a program, and then figure out how to solve the maze in a program. And I'm going to do that, and it's fun for me. But if you're like, hey, you're leaking, the sink is leaking, maybe you could get under there and say, ah!
Yeah, I'm same about cooking. Like, I have every once in a while, I'll venture into cooking, and I will screw it up so badly, and it'll taste so badly. I remember that I always think about this one moment. It was like 15 years ago. This friend of mine came over to my house and cooked this amazing meal, and I watched
everything,
what they were doing,
step by step.
And I remember consciously thinking, wow, that doesn't look that hard. And so the next few days I tried it myself, and it was a disaster. There was an eggplant thing that was just...
So imagine someone on the comments says, Kirk, you're not a good cook.
Yeah, right.
Would that bother you?
No.
No, so if I was reading comments and it says, I bet this guy can't even hang a fixture from a #2 plaster pencil, which I don't know what that means. I'd be like, no, you're right. I don't even know what to say about a comment that you might write.
#2 plaster pencil.
So the thing is, of course that wouldn't bother me.
Yeah.
Now, if someone says, oh, this guy got the math wrong or whatever, the thing I know is I'm like, listen, I'm actually, the few areas in my life that I've been awesome at, one of them was math. So if I wanted to spend the time, I'd be pretty good at this.
Yeah. But that requires a level of self-confidence.
But only in the narrow fields that you feel confident.
But I don't think a lot of people have that.
Like if I put out a video of me singing and someone was like, you could use better vibrato. Have you thought of taking voice lessons, right? I would be like,
that's not what they would say.
Right.
But that's not what they would say. What they would say is, your song sucks.
That's true.
You shouldn't have posted
and
this.
And then I would disagree, and I'd say like, well, you suck.
Yeah. But that's because I think you have higher self-esteem. So, yeah. The last thing I'll say about comments is, I do not recommend engaging. I know it's tempting, and I used to engage at times, but
that I can totally agree with.
99 times out of 100, if not 100 times out of 100, it never goes well.
100% agree. I've wasted that. I will 100% agree. I've wasted hours of my life, days of my life, going back and forth with people on Facebook and on YouTube. I don't do that now. Well, I haven't done it in a while.
Really?
Yeah.
Cold turkey.
Well, you know what? I don't know if it'll stick, but this whole pandemic thing, it got so bad. And the whole previous administration, they got so bad that I cut people out and I stopped it.
How do you feel?
It was a big weight off my shoulders, man.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, in person, I had a 4-hour conversation with a relative about politics.
When?
This was a month ago.
Yeah.
And it was painful.
Yeah.
It's painful because in the end, I feel like we ended up in a non-terrible place, but only in the sense that the one thing I was trying to get across was, I'm a person that, And yet I believe things that you think are only believed by monsters.
Right.
So maybe not everyone that believes these things believes it because they're monsters.
Yeah.
I think I might have made the slightest little chip in the, but I don't know.
Right.
Because it is hard, cognitive dissonance, when you're like, wait a minute, how can you believe that? And it goes both ways, right? Because I'm like, I know you. How can you say that, right? But it is true. Like you cannot conclude that everyone who holds N set of beliefs is a monster, because you know people that you know are not monsters, and yet they'll say some of those beliefs.
Yeah. Frankly, you've been guilty of that yourself sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because that's been one of our ongoing tiffs on the podcast is I'm trying to convince you to take it easy on the people who believe in those things. They're humans too.
And I think in general, and I've said this before, I'm like, you're probably right. There is a line somewhere. That's where I don't know where that line is.
Well, it depends on what line you're talking about. If you're talking about the line between right and wrong, yeah. But if you're talking about the line between, I don't know.
No, I mean the line
willing to dialogue.
Well, I mean the line between, at some point, a person, I have to conclude, is bad. And then I have to say, okay, that person is bad.
Doing bad things.
Yeah, sure.
Believing in a bad,
sure.
Having bad ideas.
No, because I will stop short. I'm like, no, there are good people that believe in bad ideas.
Yeah.
At some point, after a certain threshold.
Most people who believe in bad ideas are good people.
Yeah.
The Nazis.
But there's a threshold beyond which I'm like, no, you are bad.
Like you're
bad for society.
Yeah. In Germany, during World War II, they had a lot of bad ideas.
Yeah.
Was the entire population of Germany bad people? Or was it a lot of bad ideas that got very strong power?
You're right, but to be fair, the only way that got stopped was through a wicked war.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have to draw lines.
Right. So how do you effectively end the bad? Right?
In those cases,
we can't invade Alabama.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can't put what's another state? I don't know. We can't take a group of people in the United States and try them for war crimes. But we have to convince them.
When it is an informed bad actor manipulating people, I then stop saying, well, that's just a good person with bad ideas. I start saying, that's a bad person for society.
I don't know. I don't really even go there in my head because I don't know where people come from. But what I do know is that if we're going to convince people, we have to have a good relationship with them.
I think, you won't disagree probably that at some point there are certain types of individuals that you need to separate them from society because they're harming society.
Yeah.
Right. I feel the same way about certain people in positions of power, that they are so damaging that I say, no, you're actually not good to society.
It'd be nice. And those people are reflecting the constituency.
Yeah.
So
there are more good people in the constituency.
Fine, but if we're going to change, we have to change the constituency.
But without determining that they're all bad.
We have to, regardless of good or bad, we have to convince them of different ideas.
Yes.
And if we're going to do that, we have to have a good relationship with them. And if we're going to have a good relationship with them, we have to like them.
Yeah, and I think that's where there is a line that you don't cross, there's a line that I don't cross that you cross sooner.
I like those people.
And I like the idea of liking some of those people.
Yeah. So in conclusion, upper tier patron Gwen from Indiana, I'm so sorry you're going through that. Maybe go to the fan page and get a bunch of other Psychology in Seattle people to comment on your YouTube stuff and defend you. That's one of the nice things about, behind the curtain a little bit. And I think, Berto, you can relate to this, that in the so I've been on YouTube. We've been on YouTube for 13 years, 12 years or so. And in the beginning, when we were getting like 200, 300 views
Yeah.
on YouTube. The fan base was small, and the amount of people that would show up to watch it that weren't into us were pretty high. And so people would click on an episode of ours, and most of the comments would either be neutral or negative.
Because they're strangers.
Yeah, they don't know us, whatever. And it was hard, you know. So I remember the YouTube comments for years. I mean, just imagine that. I mean, people out there. Berto can imagine it because he was with me. Day, episode after episode, week after week, year after year.
And that's back when I wasn't reading those comments.
Right.
So you were telling me all about it.
Just trudging forward.
Yeah.
Year after year, desperately trying to create content that people will like, trying to be useful,
right,
trying to provide value to other people's lives, going to the comments section. Because in iTunes, you can't comment on a single episode.
No.
So people are listening on iTunes or their podcatchers, and there's no comments there back then. So the only place I was getting any real feedback was on YouTube. Right. Because back then people didn't email in very often. And so I'd go to YouTube and it would just be neutral or negative, and it was rough. Once we got a YouTube, and rough meaning that I would at times question whether or not I should even be doing this thing. Right. I thought, why am I even, like what, Gwen is saying, is like, why am I even doing this? Yeah. So like you're standing in front of a crowd of 30 people and there's 5 people yelling at you and everyone else is quiet. You're like, well, does everyone hate me?
Yeah. Should I even be here?
Why am I even here?
Right.
So then we get a fan base on YouTube. Right. That likes us and are familiar with us, like our tone, maybe gives us the benefit of the doubt if we make a mistake here and there. Yeah. The way you would with someone you're familiar with. And when someone negatively comments, they get blasted a little bit.
They do. They get. So this happened to me on Discord. Nink?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I met her actually on Zoom because she's one of the moderators on the Discord.
So
channel.
A while back on, I think Berto MA or one of these things, she had posted something like, I find Berto kind of creepy. Okay. And I, of course, being me,
what do you think she meant by that exactly?
Well, we talked about it since.
Oh.
And I think I think she was sensing.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I'll tell you how I felt in both internally and externally. Externally, I did what I would do, which is I wrote in, I was like, you're not wrong, or something like this. I was like, oh, absolutely, I'm definitely creepy. Internally, I was a little hurt because I was like, well,
yeah, because you
don't know me.
You're not trying to be creepy.
No.
And creepy is a pretty hard
thing. And actually, creepy triggers me a little bit because in 2005, I was interested in this one girl at a club, and I was being awkward. I was texting her while we were in the same general room, and she found that to be super creepy, and she told her friends that I was being creepy. And later, because we were mutual friends, so her friends told me later, like, she thought you were being super creepy. And I was like, why? Because you were texting her. Like, I wasn't texting her dick pics. What are you talking? Like, I know, but you were in the same room. I'm like, well, but we were like, so I was like, okay, whatever. So that creepy word triggers me a little bit. Okay. But the thing was,
I mean, just to analyze, because I think the word creepy I think it needs to be analyzed a little bit, because in that instance, you met someone that you had reason to believe liked you romantically.
Yeah.
Right?
At least was interested in some level of interaction with you.
Right. And so you're in the same room, but you don't want to go over to her and monopolize her time. So you text her. Now, she can not text you back if she doesn't want to.
And at the time, I'm a total noob at the whole texting thing anyway. So I think this is a thing that you could do.
This is a little fun little missive I'm sending. And so for her, she obviously wasn't into you. and she's like, I don't want to get text messages from this guy.
Right.
So
that's creepy.
So that's creepy. What if she liked you?
That wouldn't have been creepy.
Right. So I feel like people need to refine the word creepy and say, in that context, and say what he was doing was uninvited. Yeah. I think that's a better word. I did not want him to text me. Yeah. I wanted him to stop, and I didn't want him to be hitting on me.
Now, There is a possibility, because one of the things that happened is I first met her at a different club early in the night. And now it could just be me, but we were having what I thought was a really good back and forth, laughing and stuff. And then I said goodbye for the night. And I didn't ask her number. I was just like, this was a good exchange. Goodbye. We had one of those awkward run-ins later at a different club. And I was like, oh, you're here. And then the magic was gone. But I was in my head like, oh, I should rekindle the magic. But I might have been a little awkward as a result. I don't know, right? I'm guessing that by the time I sent her that text, I had screwed it up, right? But in either case, so she says that.
But you got to figure if she was into you.
Well, no, of course she was. No, that's obvious. But I'm saying if there was any shot early in the night, I screwed it up before the text.
Okay.
And there might have never been a shot.
Right.
But I think that by the time I texted her, we were no longer simpatico, and I didn't realize it.
Right.
Okay.
Which is fine. And she could just be like, yeah, I could see why he thinks that I'm into him because we had a connection earlier, but I'm not into him.
And to be clear, it wasn't a text like, I'm looking at you.
Yeah.
Or something weird, you know? It's like, it was like something about music, or it was something like.
Yeah, the way that you flirt is extremely non-sexual.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you flirt in a sort of interesting conversational way.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So Ning says that, and I go in and I'm like, yeah, I definitely am. Okay. But then people jump in the thread, in the Discord chat, and they're like, why would you say that? And then other people are like, oh, I don't find him creepy at all. I find that. And it was like so many defenses. I was like, oh, that's nice. Now, later, she told me that, and this is interesting. She might have...
she told you this in private, or she told you?
Yeah, later in a DM on Discord, she said this.
Wait, I don't know if you should say, you shouldn't say unless she...
Fair. Okay, fair enough. It was something about me.
Something public on...
Yeah,
I mean, we'll make your own judgment, but if it was public comments...
Okay, I'm going to make a judgment that I think she'd be okay with me revealing this because it's about me.
Okay. Can you ask her after we record?
I will definitely ask her. Yeah, okay. I'll ask her. What she said was that she got a sense from me, that abuser vibe.
Uh-huh.
And I told her, well, that's not unfounded because I was abused and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I think that for whatever reason, she picked up something from some episode, who knows, whatever, and it gave her a little bit of that vibe. And then she's like, I find him creepy. But then, since then, she said, no, I totally changed my mind. Like, you're not creepy at all, blah, 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 blah. But the cool thing is that people defended me.
Right.
You know?
So rewind the clock just even a year or two ago, someone would have said, I think Berto's creepy, and no one would have come to your defense.
Yeah.
And it would just be out there. And you'd just be like, okay, I guess I'm creepy to everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that's my thing. So now we have people. Now, everyone out there, please do not attack people who are criticizing us.
No.
It's wonderful if you can provide context for people or just offer your opinion in a nice way.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't see Berto that way, that kind of comment. But please don't, because I see it sometimes in the comments, people in a very loving way to us will almost gang up on someone. And I don't want our audience to, two wrongs don't make a right.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Well, that is it for that episode. Let us know what you think in the comments. We may or may not read them. And remember that Berto wants to be useful.
Useful. He
likes being complimented, even though he kind of acts like he doesn't. And, so we have to read the comments of this episode, don't we?
That was a really awkward ending.
And that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.